Buonasera e benvenuti in un caldo pomeriggio al Castello di Rivoli. Comunque è sempre fresco perché ci rinfreschiamo i cervelli con l'arte e con i pensieri sull'arte. È mio grande onore accogliere al Museo d'Arte Contemporanea, il primo museo d'arte contemporanea aperto in questo paese nel lontano 1984, la grande critica d'arte e storica dell'arte Rosalind Krauss. Rosalind Krauss non ha bisogno di presentazioni, naturalmente. Generazioni e generazioni di artisti, di storici dell'arte, di critici d'arte, di teorici, di persone generiche hanno letto i suoi libri, fino al più recente su De Kooning, che non so se è stato tradotto, ancora no. Ma di Rosalind Krauss parlerà brevemente, dopo la mia presentazione, Luca Cerizza. Colgo l'occasione per presentarvi Luca Cerizza, che molti conoscono, ma presentarvelo in un'altra veste, cioè come responsabile di un nuovo dipartimento nascente che è il CRRI, Castello di Rivoli Research Institute, o Centro di Ricerca Castello di Rivoli, che è collegato ad un ampliamento della nostra biblioteca e alla nascita di un centro di studio e di valorizzazione attiva degli archivi di artisti, di collezionisti, di critici che sono presenti in Italia, primariamente attenti all'arte dopo la fine degli anni, diciamo, emersa a partire dalla fine degli anni 60. E stiamo in pieno lavoro con il CRRI, gli spazi della biblioteca che sono dietro a questa sala conferenze verranno quindi ristrutturati e adibiti a questo scopo, e la conferenza di Rosalind Krauss rientra in un programma di invito a studiosi da tutto il mondo, sia per presentare le loro ricerche sia per attingere ai materiali che abbiamo nei nostri archivi. Quindi non vorrei togliere altro tempo e passerei, dopo aver ringraziato tutto lo staff che ha portato a termine questa giornata eccellentemente, perché vedo la sala piena, quindi l'ufficio delle relazioni esterne con Manuela Vasco, Roberta Ghemo, la biblioteca stessa e tutti coloro quindi che ci aiutano anche in veste di tecnici qui. Passo la parola a Luca Cerizza per una breve laudatio.
Grazie a tutti di essere venuti così numerosi, so alcuni da molto lontano, e ovviamente devo ringraziare Rosalind Krauss per aver accettato l'invito del nostro direttore, e devo ringraziare ovviamente Caroline Christoph-Bakagiev per questo, per l'invito a lavorare in questa istituzione per questo nuovo progetto. Allora, da dove partire? Io partirei da una premessa, è quella che abbiamo caricato sul nostro sito, sul sito dei materiali speciali riguardo a come anticipazione preparare questo evento. Un'intervista, un materiale è un'intervista dello storico d'arte e saggista Riccardo Venturi a Rosalind Krauss, è un'intervista che era stata fatta nel 2012, che noi abbiamo ripresentato in una veste molto più ampia. E un'altra è una breve intervista che ho fatto recentemente a Elio Grazioli, che è un critico d'arte di fotografia, che voi tutti conoscete, credo, che è anche colui che ha curato e tradotto la stragrande maggioranza dei libri della Krauss pubblicati in Italia. Quando ho chiesto a Grazioli quale fosse, secondo lui, l'ascito più importante del pensiero critico della Krauss, Grazioli ha risposto: Alcune delle sue idee sono ormai un'eredità. Ci ha fatto capire davvero cosa significa indicalità in arte e in fotografia, la sua importanza storica. Il campo allargato, che lei ha formulato per la scultura, è un insegnamento in ogni ambito. La sua rilettura del surrealismo è determinante anche per chi non ama questo movimento. La sua interpretazione dell'informe è diventata addirittura un tormentone. La sua interpretazione dell'inconscio ottico è da mettere accanto a quelle di Molinaggi e di Benjamin. La reinterpretazione del medium e la sua polemica sulla post-medialità non può essere elusa. E così via, e così Grazioli. E l'elenco ovviamente potrebbe essere molto più lungo, l'elenco delle conquiste critiche di Rosalind Krauss, ma sarebbe ovviamente impossibile continuare questo elenco, e quindi ho preferito focalizzare il mio intervento su 3 termini, su una triangolazione di concetti che mi sembra attraversino tutta la lunga parabola di Rosalind Krauss dagli esordi fino ad adesso, fino ai nostri anni, rilanciata con una nuova e sicuramente grande forza polemica attraverso i suoi ultimi libri. Questi 3 termini sono modernismo, metodo e medium. Iniziamo dal primo termine, cioè modernismo. Come forse sapete, il lavoro critico di Rosalind Krauss si colloca nel momento finale della grande stagione modernista, dominata negli Stati Uniti dalla teoria formalista di Clement Greenberg. Secondo il critico americano, cito, ogni arte deve determinare attraverso le operazioni che le sono proprie l'effetto che le appartiene esclusivamente, scriveva Greenberg nel 63. E quindi l'area di competenza propria e specifica di ogni arte deve coincidere con ciò che era più proprio della natura del suo medium. Krauss si avvicina al pensiero di Greenberg durante i suoi studi, trovando nei suoi testi un antidoto al carattere romantico e idealista della critica di quel tempo, soprattutto di quella che aveva accompagnato la stagione dell'espressionismo astratto e dell'informale, pensiamo a Harold Rosenberg ad esempio. Da dottoranda sull'artista David Smith, Krauss era entrata in contatto e in rapporto di amicizia con Greenberg, per poi distaccarsene mentre emerge sulla scena artistica americana il minimalismo, profondamente avversato da Greenberg. Siamo intorno alla metà degli anni 60. L'attività critica di Krauss, prima sulla rivista Forum, inizia dal 1966 e poi come contributing editor nel 71, e poi sulla rivista October, che voi tutti conoscete, fondata dalla stessa Krauss insieme a Annette Michelson nel 76. Dicevo, l'attività di Krauss sarà da una parte dedicata ad alcuni artisti della sua generazione, quindi con una prospettiva più militante, e che segnavano ovviamente già una cesura con la stagione modernista, pensiamo ai testi scritti su Donald Judd e Richard Serra, e dall'altra ad un'analisi sempre più approfondita della stagione moderna. Lo scopo della Krauss sarà quello niente meno che di smascherare una serie di miti e di deviazioni del modernismo, al fine di definire una nuova narrazione che evidenzi le rimozioni, le incongruenze e le semplificazioni del modello idealista e storicista che appunto veniva applicato al modernismo. A questo proposito dovremmo almeno citare 3 libri: L'originalità dell'avanguardia e altri miti modernisti, una raccolta di saggi pubblicata nel 1985, The Optical Unconscious, l'inconscio ottico del 93, e dove ovviamente la Krauss mette in questione l'otticalità professata dal modernismo, e Formless, l'informe del 1996, dove sulla scorta di Bataille e insieme a Yves-Alain Bois, Krauss propone una terza via al dualismo consunto, forma-contenuto tipico del modernismo. Ma come raggiungere questo scopo così ambizioso? La risposta di Krauss, o almeno così l'ho immaginata, è con una serie di strumenti critici nuovi. E qui introduciamo il secondo termine della nostra trilogia, metodo. Altra questione centrale che fa dire a Krauss nell'introduzione appunto all'originalità dell'avanguardia: è possibile sostenere la tesi che l'interesse di un testo critico consista quasi esclusivamente nel suo metodo? In questa raccolta di testi, pubblicata in Italia ovviamente più tardi, il modernismo viene riletto come un momento complesso e non omogeneo, attraverso una metodologia nuova, inedita per la critica d'arte e articolata sul pensiero strutturalista e post-strutturalista. I testi di Ferdinand de Saussure, di Michel Foucault, Ronald Barthes, Jacques Derrida, Jacques Lacan, tra gli altri, diventano in questi anni gli strumenti privilegiati da Krauss per l'analisi dell'opera d'arte. Attraverso questi strumenti interpretativi Krauss rovescia le posizioni su cui si basava il pensiero greenbergiano, rifiutando il modello storicista e mettendo in crisi, cito ancora l'introduzione della Krauss, le forme senza tempo, transstoriche, che erano state considerate come categorie indistruttibili all'interno delle quali aveva luogo ogni sviluppo estetico. Una serie di miti dell'arte, l'idea di autore, di genio, di ispirazione, di evoluzione, vengono messi in discussione e decostruiti dall'analisi di Rosalind Krauss. All'interno di questa analisi Krauss definisce una serie di concetti che l'accompagneranno anche nel suo lavoro successivo. Un concetto è quello di griglia, grid, che è la struttura, il campo dove agisce molta pittura modernista. Uno spazio che, dice Krauss, promuove il silenzio, che annulla la parola, è uno spazio che non ha gerarchie né centro. E sulla griglia, la griglia viene usata ad esempio in un testo su Rodin dove mette, come dire, in questione l'idea dell'originalità di Rodin e invece mostra come Rodin usasse le copie e la ripetizione all'interno del suo lavoro. Un altro concetto fondamentale sviluppato in questi anni è quello di indice o dell'indicalità, appunto, termine applicato da Krauss alla fotografia, a cui dedicherà un libro importantissimo, come appunto ha confermato Elio Grazioli, e che interpreta il mezzo fotografico come indice, piuttosto che come icona. L'indice è definito dalla Krauss come, cito, quel tipo di segno che emerge come manifestazione fisica di una causa, di cui sono esempi le tracce e le impronte. E questo carattere appunto indicale Krauss lo troverà nell'opera di Duchamp, come in certe produzioni dell'arte degli anni 70, nella quale l'informazione scritta supplisce al potere estenuato del segno pittorico. Un altro concetto che Krauss battezza e porta a estrema popolarità, uno di quelli forse più conosciuti da un pubblico più ampio, è quello di campo allargato, di expanded field, in un testo del 1978. Un testo appunto in cui studia la scultura che era emersa alla fine degli anni 60 negli Stati Uniti. Se la critica d'arte storicista aveva difficoltà a inquadrare le opere dei minimalisti dei land artist nella definizione di scultura, Krauss definisce queste nuove espressioni di pura negatività, la sua definizione di assenza ontologica, nello sforzo, io direi, di mantenerle ancora all'interno del linguaggio scultoreo e non in quello dell'installazione. Qua si apre poi una polemica sull'installazione di cui credo Krauss parlerà nel suo intervento. Ma Krauss aveva già pubblicato nel 1977 un libro intero sulla scultura, Passages in Modern Sculpture, a dimostrazione dell'attenzione particolare per questo medium, e quindi arriviamo al terzo termine della nostra trilogia. Si può dire che il discorso sul medium attraversi buona parte dell'attività critica di Rosalind Krauss, ed è un discorso ovviamente strettamente legato all'essenza del modernismo, al suo rapporto con quella stagione. Già dalla sua analisi della scultura, appunto del minimalismo, del post-minimalismo e della land art, la Krauss rompe con l'autoriflessività e l'autoreferenzialità, ovviamente di matrice modernista, per aprire questa nuova scultura a una dimensione temporale. Se, ci ricorda la Krauss, questo carattere temporale era già stato osservato da Lessing nel suo famoso testo Laocoonte nel 1776, ora, secondo la Krauss, ritorna di attualità nella nuova scultura della fine degli anni 60. Questi artisti, e vorrei aggiungere molta dell'arte italiana raggruppata sotto l'etichetta di arte povera, e direi anche quella di Gilberto Zorio, ad esempio Giovanni Anselmo, dicevo, questa dimensione temporale della scultura nuova di quegli anni trasforma la scultura medium statico idealizzato, cito ancora la Krauss, in un medium temporale e materiale. Le loro opere, dice la Krauss, ci invitano a fare esperienza del presente. Anche grazie alla lettura di Derrida, per cui il medium specifico del modernismo è sostituito dalla sfida decostruttiva al chi sei, Krauss rompe con quello che ha definito il rozzo positivismo di Greenberg, legato alla sostanza fisica del medium. Come voi sapete, per cui ovviamente la pittura deve essere bidimensionale, la scultura deve essere tridimensionale, autonoma come oggetto, e il disegno è la traccia ricorrente dei contorni. D'altro canto, e qui emerge una questione decisiva della sua produzione recente e della conferenza che ascolterete tra pochissimo, Krauss non accetta la completa liberazione dal medium sancita da quella che lei definisce la condizione post-mediale. Cos'è la condizione post-mediale? La condizione post-mediale, secondo Krauss, è la situazione anticipata dal ready-made duchampiano, con il suo spostamento dallo specifico al generale, e poi inaugurato dall'arte concettuale, in cui il verbale, il testuale sostituisce il visivo e in cui l'arte diventa filosofia, secondo Joseph Kossuth, e per cui non importa in quale medium un'idea sia incarnata perché è l'idea che conta. E ovviamente qua si può rimandare ai paragrafi di Sollevite del 67, alla dichiarazione di intenti di Wiener l'anno dopo. Bisogna poi aggiungere che la liberazione dalla specificità del medium inaugurata dall'arte concettuale è poi perseguita dall'institutional critique, con la sua aderenza al luogo, cioè il site specificity, o al contesto, context specific, ed esplosa nelle diverse forme dell'installazione, che è appunto uno degli obiettivi polemici di questi ultimi libri di Rosalind Krauss. Questa situazione opera, secondo la Krauss, la cancellazione dell'idea stessa del medium, così che si è semplicemente, dice la Krauss, ricongiunto la realtà dei media, cioè i complessi strumenti tecnologici della pubblicità, della comunicazione e dell'informazione. Il risultato di questo spostamento semantico tra medium e media è la perdita della specificità presentata come conseguenza naturale. Ma è questa cancellazione, questa perdita di memoria, questo oblio che Krauss non accetta, ed è su questo confine che si organizza e combatte la sua resistenza. Nella, e cito ancora Krauss, necessità di continuare a considerare il medium specifico come base della coerenza estetica. Lascio quindi a Rosalind Krauss il piacere di spiegarci con che compagni d'arme e con quali strategie abbia deciso di operare questa resistenza. Grazie.
Thank you very, very much for this wonderful, warm welcome. And I think you see on the screen above me the title of my lecture, which is basically Knighthood. I left that out. The Medium Strikes Back, which has a kind of ring of Star Wars. And my work has indeed been, could be characterized as striking back, that is to say, as contesting or attacking positions, critical or curatorial or art historical positions that I think of as the sort of parade of received ideas. They are non-self-critical, and they are, as far as I can see, empty. And so my work has been to try to fill that gap, and sometimes it has to be, I apologize for this, but it has to be aggressive. So hence the medium strikes back. But I am the editor, as you've heard, of a magazine called October. And that magazine is indeed dedicated to the idea of striking back. And at an editorial meeting that we had shortly after the election, one of the editors said, we have to do something about Trump. We can't just not respond. And what he suggested was that each of us has a special sort of critical gift or theoretical gift, and we should use that in making little texts that would attack Trump. And my attack is called Love Me Sender, which of course, sounds like the title of an Elvis Presley song, which is Love Me Tender. So here is our friend. And what I wanted to do, excuse me if I'm going to read this text, but what I wanted to do in this was to come to terms with Trump's compulsion to govern through his Twitter account, governed by tweets. So I'm sorry, I'm going to read this. The rest of my lecture will be viva voce. But during the Republican nomination campaigns, as night after night we were told of the massive lines of people awaiting the arrival of Trump, of the screams that greeted his pronouncements, as if at a rock concert, it quickly became clear that his own passion to take the stage was in direct relation to this wave of love. In our erotic lives, Freud writes about the nature of the love he calls transference, or le transfert. There is a direct ratio between the increase of fantasy and the decrease of reality, a ratio paralleling the domination of unconscious feelings over conscious ones. This is the ratio Freud calls transference, the libidinal fantasy investment that patients have to their doctors. And he wrote about this in 1912 in an essay called The Dynamics of Transference. In the Trump prime time, we have witnessed the effect of a massive transference, a fantasy-driven rush to affirm the very basis of a threat to his audience's reality. And an example of this would be, the sort of insane agreement with Trump, or the Republican attack on health insurance. Most of these people, millions and millions of people are going to lose health insurance, and many of them never have had health insurance in their whole lives. And it must be said that the whole Congress of the United States has incredible health insurance. It pays for, the slightest little twinge. And this idea that they want to deprive 40 million Americans of health insurance, and there is no kind of reaction to that, this is the example of transference, a transference love. Well, I think that this idea of transference only has interest insofar as it might explain this hallucinatory obsession Trump has to his Twitter account and to govern through 140 character pronouncements at dawn, his tweets. And let me show you this, a tweet where we end up with how he generally ends. Can you see what this pointer said? Sad. There are these sort of little punctual interpretations of whatever statement he's making in the tweet. So these little snorts of interpretation, like sad, conforms to what Freud analyzes as the inevitable outcome of transference love, which is called counter-transference, in which the physician falls back in love with the patient. Countertransference arises in relation to the investment the analyst has in the therapeutic relationship. The therapeutic relationship built up by the exchange of his interpretations with his patient as interlocutor. The two of them intertwined as in a sequence of DNA. His interpretations, as witnessed in his written record of the Dora case, which was called Fragments of an Analysis of a Case of Hysteria, which he wrote in 1905, these interpretations were both pointed and percussively brief. For example, he says, I am accordingly driven to conclude, or I notice. Yet these interpretations were strongly refuted by Dora herself. And their mutual contestation, that is, Freud and Dora contradicting each other, their mutual contestation of interpretations resulted in an intense interlocking that is the characteristic of the erotics of countertransference. As he was coming to the end of composing Dora's case history, Freud wrote to his constant correspondent, Wilhelm Fliess. He wrote, the consequence is that today I feel short of a drug. And in a sense, we can think of Trump's tweets as related to this idea of being short of a drug. And Freud himself thought of the sort of the danger of countertransference, that is to say, of the analyst being dragged into the patient's neurosis. In relation to this, he advised analysts to go back into their training analysis to sort of clear the decks of anything that would bring them into this kind of relationship. So, in order to explain Trump's bizarre need to tweet, I am turning to the unconscious and therefore compulsive response to transference, which I just talked about as countertransference. In Freud's interpretive interchange with Dora, this countertransference is constant. He says, I questioned the patient very cautiously as to whether she knew, or I said, whom are you copying now? I asked her, and found I had hit the mark. And Dora's symptomatic loss of voice allowed of a sequence of symbolic interpretations. And Freud writes, but I added, or naturally I asked her, I myself, however, and then these are, in the Dora account, Freud writes these very, very percussive, short interpretations of Dora. And my conclusion is that the transferential waves of love that buoyed Trump through the ardor of campaigning, acting as his drug, have stimulated a countertransference that prevents him from disengaging himself from the interlocking passions of himself and his audience, and impelling him to interject his 40 character interpretations at dawn. Sad. Where's the sad? There it is. So, Love Me Sender is an example of the sort of desire that I have. I mean, you can think of me as being involved in countertransference, but anyway, I have this need to attack people who I think are stupid. Well, I don't think Catherine David is stupid at all. She was the director of Documenta 12, which was held in 1996 at Kassel, of course. And she was interviewed on a train, and it's a train that, in order to get to Kassel, you take a train to the city of Kassel, and in order to get to the Friedrichsmuseum, which is the park in which Documenta is held, you have to take a little shuttle train. And she was interviewed on this little shuttle train, and in it she talked about her desire or her need to attack the idea of the medium. And, in this she says that everybody knows that the white cube is dead. And I'm showing you this gallery, white gallery, as an example of the white cube. And in sort of critical parlance, the notion of the white cube stood for the idea of the work of art as withdrawn, as sort of autonomous, as withdrawn from ongoing reality, but rather withdrawn into this special sacred space of the museum or the art gallery. That was, in a sense, the white cube. And also that works of art would make a certain relationship between themselves and the white wall. That there would be, for instance, in terms of modernist painting, what Greenberg calls the flatness and the delimitation of flatness. In that sense, the work itself makes a kind of representation of the wall on which it hangs. And just to sort of explain what I mean by the word medium, what I mean is the physical support for the work of art in the way that painting is supported by canvas, or sculpture supported by the block of marble or wood, or the sort of scaffolding of metal. Those are the physical supports for the work of art. And we could say that a modernist work of art figures forth or represents this support, the medium. I hope that's clear, because I do not want to confuse it with the idea of media, which is journalism or television. Medium is instead the physical support for a work of art. And in this interview on the train, Catherine David says that she doesn't believe anymore in the, in the separation between the arts. She finds that sort of a kind of false assumption that there is some sort of separation between the arts, and that there is an idea of purity, the purity of, let's say, painting and its distinction from sculpture. And because Kathleen David is French and she was working in Kassel, and she needed kind of a medium to sort of go between her French and Kassel's German, she had this wonderful assistant whose name was Hortensia Volkers. Here she is. And what she said was, she was also interviewed for this film, and what she said was that Kathleen David was very anxious for the exhibition to start in a train station so that people would not think of chasing after Easter eggs or, excuse me, precious works. And on this shuttle train, Kathleen David says in the interview on the train, she says that she thinks of the work or the exhibition as very cinematographic. And as you go on the train, you pass work after work, all of them little installations. And here is one which is called the Pig Hut. It was made by Karsten Hurler. And, indeed it was a place where they raised pigs. And this notion of, there being no longer any purity to the work of art, no longer any differentiation between the pure work of art and the media, that is to say, the sort of the world that rushes by outside it, that art is no longer autonomous. I think of that as related to, again and again, the way the Pig Hut is an installation. Installation art is itself very involved in collapsing the distinction between one medium and another. And what you see on the screen is a Bill Viola called Cabin for St. John of the Cross. And in it you see, in what is supposed to be his study, a little lighted window here where you see a little television monitor, and what's on the monitor is this amazing landscape that's projected on the wall beyond the little hut. And so in a sense, like what he's writing has to do, or the interior of his thinking is the world around him, this raging mountain storm. And this sense really of our sort of getting into his thinking process, again, has to do with sort of denying, we could say, the kind of intellectual autonomy of the writer or the thinker. This notion of autonomy and of the way that the artist represents his own medium is, of course, very prominent in the work of Mondrian. And I show you here this very beautiful drawing of, the seashore. you know, waves and dunes. And what I want to talk about now is something very different. It's a work by Harun Farokhi. And Farokhi, as you see in this work here, I'm sorry I can't turn around, so I guess it's on the left screen. Is that it? It's on the left side? It's your left, right? It's this one. This is a work called Interphase. And what you do is you read from one monitor across to another monitor. I mean, that's how the work unfolds. And it tells kind of a story in which he speaks of his own way of proceeding, which is sort of between monitors as he's working in his editorial bench. And he says, today I can barely think through a new film unless I have two screens, unless I kind of move back and forth between these two screens. And then he talks about, he moves into this notion, he says, here is the German encoding machine called Enigma. And he says the machine encodes according to a program, a completely random program in which you, he says when you type a letter into the machine, you set off an electrical impulse, which means that nobody can decode. I mean, this was invented during World War II so that no one would be able to decode, you know, the messages that were being sent within, you know, the German military. And what happened was that in Bletchley Park, which is, you know, MI5, it's the British intelligence service, they determined to break Enigma. And what you see here is Alan Turing, who invented the computer. And it was only through the computer that they were able to compute enough material. And here we see another picture of Turing. And what we can say, I think, is that what Farokhi is doing is by making this, he's making a kind of relationship between what he's doing and Enigma, or the sort of decoding of Enigma, because what you have to do when you edit video is to, you have to work by digitizing analog images. And therefore, there is a sort of process of decoding and recoding kind of the, you know, the natural event. And what I think, you know, Farokhi does in this work called Interphase is that insofar as there is this back and forth between the two monitors that are set on pedestals within the museum where you see the work, is that your eye has to pass back and forth between them, and when it passes from one to the other, it hits the wall of the white cube. So we are reminded that we are in a gallery and that the work itself is very medium specific. That is to say, it is referring to the editing room, you know, in which Farokhi is making the work. This idea of the specificity of the medium was not only attacked by Bill Viola, but also by that whole generation which we call postmodernist, in which, for instance, Anselm Kiefer, in this work, kind of violates the idea of the flatness of the canvas and the specificity of painting itself, but also Michael Graves, an American architect, in this building he made for Portland, Oregon, in making, you know, in kind of colored tiles, the image of a a Doric capital, a sort of Greek column, is a sort of violation of modernist architecture's rejection of imagery and also of anything to do with classicism. So Graves returns to a kind of classical past, which is a way of evacuating modern architecture. And then I want to go on to the case of sculpture and to the very important case of Richard Serra, who is one of the most brilliant sculptors we have working today. And what you see next to the Maillot, this one, which is called Night, and gives us this sort of very conventional, traditional way that sculptors expressed their work by kind of representing the sense of the kind of, excuse me, primal cube from which the work is made. Well, Serra's one-ton prop, House of Cards, itself is, you could say, a cube. But the cube only stays up. The house only stays up because it's like what a house of cards does. You know, one plane is pushing against another, and that's how the whole thing stays vertical. And Serra makes another example in which he holds up these lead planes through a kind of rolled lead bar that pushes down on them so that they stand vertical by having this huge weight pressing down on them. And that, we could say, that idea that sculpture is made vertical through a kind of compression of gravity. This is one thing I think that is part of the sort of genius of really important contemporary artists, and that is that they reinvent some part of their medium, some traditional part, and the traditional part that Serra is reinventing is what we call contrapposto. Contrapposto, and I'm showing you this example in the Polyclitus Spear Bearer, contrapposto is when weight, you know, in this case, the figure of a man, he's kind of resting all of his weight on his vertical leg, and therefore the sort of the other leg is released into a relaxed posture, and that sort of opposition between the leg that's holding up and the other leg that's bending and therefore giving way to gravity. You see, this is a very long tradition within sculpture. I'm showing you the Michelangelo, the Donatello, and this is an example, I think, of Serra, who is an incredibly great sculptor, reinventing contrapposto. And I want to show you another example. I'm showing it to you, in writing, and unfortunately it's written in English, but it's from a poem by the American poet Jory Graham. And it's a line from one of her poems in which she says, "The fire flies gauze." In French, that would be "les lucioles toile," or tuile. And gauze here is turned from a noun into a verb. And that is a kind of way, I think, of reinventing metaphor. You don't have to say "is like," because the fact that it does it makes it clear that it's like. I hope that is, what I'm saying is clear. So what I'm saying is that great artists are contemporary artists are always involved in the idea of the traditional support for their art. And for poetry, metaphor is, of course, an enormously important topos. And so the reinvention of metaphor becomes part of Graham's kind of connection to her own tradition, which is poetry. And kind of the collapse of this idea of the importance of the support, I think, comes with conceptual art. And I'm showing you here a picture of Joseph Kossuth, where he says, being an artist now means to question the nature of art. If one is questioning the nature of painting, one cannot be questioning the nature of art. If an artist accepts painting or sculpture, he is accepting the tradition that goes with it. And I've been saying that what great art is exactly about accepting the tradition that goes with it, or if not just accepting it, reinventing part of the tradition. And I've showed you this before, and this, and here we're having a little review, and now I want to go into something different, and that is that with the advent of postmodernism, many artists felt that the tradition in which they were working had become obsolete, died, or as I think Luca said about me, had become history, which is finished. Well, you didn't say that I had become history. Or some of my ideas had become history. Well, I am showing you here work by a very great California artist named Ed Ruscha. And what I'm showing you for is that with the advent of postmodernism and the sense that the traditional mediums no longer exist, you know, they don't function anymore, those supports are simply obsolete. Certain artists feel that they have to kind of invent a support. And what they do, I mean, inventing a medium is a very bizarre idea because mediums evolve over centuries of practice. But what I'm saying is that the importance and the pressure of the medium in order to do good art meant that many artists had to, invent as a medium what I call a technical support. A technical support being something, you know, from industrial use or some found medium. And in the case of Ed Ruscha, that medium is the automobile. And we remember the sort of the gasoline stations that Ruscha paints, or, you know, these incredible book of these photographs of parking lots, which of course has to do with cars. And one of the things I want you to notice in the parking lot is the stains, you know, that are deposited from, you know, when cars are parked in the lot. There's oil that leaks out of their crankcases. I have no idea what the translator is going to do with that. You know, but the part in the engine that has the oil. And it leaks onto the tarmac of the parking lot, and you see these stains, these oil stains. And what Ruscha then did was to make books of stains. And here you see two of these books. And the stains were sort of amazing. The books were covered with some kind of fabric. And you see Ed Ruscha's stains, or one of them is called Various Cruelties. And the fabric was stained by the most amazing conglomeration of things like blueberry syrup, chocolate, maple syrup. I mean, all of this sort of stuff that was to produce colors for stains. And in sort of thinking about Ruscha's, in a sense, when he uses the stains, he's not only referring to the parking lots and their stains, but also further back to the tradition of painting, which brought about stain painting. And I'm showing you here a Morris Louis veil. And the sort of color field painting that was celebrated in the 60s and 70s was called stain painting. And this is, of course, this extremely beautiful clay painting that Walter Benjamin owned, which was called the Angelus Novus, or the Angel of History. And what Benjamin writes is that that each, the angel is staring back at sort of progress and the sort of piling up of one thing after another as a kind of debris, as every new invention makes the other thing obsolete. And so there is, in a way, this Angelus Novus is for me, kind of makes an image for me of what these artists are doing. Excuse me. As they look back at the history of a medium and reinvent it through their own technical support. So I'm now showing you things that you've already seen, and now I want to show you examples of, other examples of artists using or inventing, using a technical sort and inventing a medium through doing that. Now I have to sort of figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
I click on this,
Yeah.
okay. I click on this, right?
Yeah.
By Christian Barclay called Video Quartet. Look there, look there. This is Christian Barclay's work called Video Quartet, in which what you see in the sort of band of images under the screen, what you see is a sort of continuum of sound films. Pianos playing, the trumpets blaring. I was always sort of wondering why we didn't see Janet Leigh in that horrible moment where she screams in the shower in Psycho, but we didn't. But there's sometimes a sort of, across that bottom set of screens, a kind of repetition of form, as in the roulette wheel and the phonograph turntable. But the most amazing moment is when the cockroaches fall onto the keyboard and scurry over it and don't make a single sound. And essentially, at this moment, we are transported back from sound film to that moment in 1929 where film shifted from silence to sound. So we have, in a sense, Barclay considering the history of film. And the cockroaches running on the keyboard, of course, are soundless, as the the organist's feet on the pedals of the organ, or we could say in this one here, the sort of score for music, which is soundless, and this kind of consideration of the beginning of sound is sort of the genius, I think, of this Markley work. I'd like to consider another artist who is, you know, the most supreme genius of them all, who also, here we have William Kentridge. And for me, I mean, what you see here is the the Central Police Station, which is in Johannesburg, and you see here the windows of the police station. And I'm going to show you a little clip of it.
Listen to the voice of agents of Africa.
So did you see that? I mean, as the figures are falling down past the illuminated windows, the windows look like film frames that are rolling back, you know, spooling back into the projector's gate. So we have this sort of, we have this representation of the very physical support of film. And I think this is totally brilliant. And it was when I was looking at this incredible exhibition put on, a retrospective of Kentridge's work by Carol and Christophe Bakardziev, that I had this sort of amazing kind of revelation, a sort of breakthrough into how contemporary artists can figure forth or represent their own medium. And Kentridge's medium, this is a figure from another one of his films. This is a film called Mine. Kentridge's medium has to do with making drawings and taking a frame of film of the drawing and then erasing the drawing and making another frame, so that you get, in a sense, a way, you know, that cartoonists work in order to sort of make the drawing burst into motion. And here we have another incredible example. This is from a work called History of the Main Complaint, where Soho Eckstein, the character you saw before, Soho Eckstein is driving through the rain, and we see, oh, didn't work. Sorry. Why is this not working? Isn't that incredible? So the wipers become his erasers. There's a sort of picture of how he makes the work by erasing. And there are other technical supports that artists have invented. And one of the artists I think is very interesting is Sophie Kahl, who, well, here you have a work of hers called Address Book. And Address Book was about she was in a bar next to a guy who dropped his address book and walked away, and so she picked it up, and it had all these telephone numbers of his women friends. And so she called them one by one and had a little conversation about the guy. And as she did this, she put together the idea of who the guy was. And day by day, in the French journal called, newspaper called Libération, she published, daily accounts of who this guy was. And what you have there, I think, is the example. Her medium is investigative journalism. The way Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward operated in relationship to Watergate. I mean, they solved Watergate by becoming investigative journalists. And so that, I think, is Sophie Kuhl's medium. And here is a work that she did called The Lady from Ile Saint-Louis Vanishes. And what this was about was a guard who was a guard for the Sophie Kuhl exhibition, a big exhibition that she had at the Centre Pompidou in Paris. And the guard became absolutely obsessed with Sophie Kuhl, and what she did was imitate her, and she would follow the various visitors to the exhibition. She would follow them out from the exhibition and take pictures of them. They wouldn't know that they were being photographed. And there was a fire in her apartment building on the Ile Saint-Louis, and when the firemen went in, what they found were these sort of charred photo negatives. And again, there is this sort of sense that this sort of going and following the visitors to the museum was like trying to make a picture of who her audience was. And one of the sort of amazing works she did was called Take Care of Yourself. And that was in the 2002 Venice Biennale. That was in the pavilion. And I'm showing you here, it was installed in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. And it's in the reading room here. And what you see, I mean, on the tables of the reading room, there were kind of a succession of monitors, screens, and on them you saw these various famous actresses, Miranda Richardson, Catherine Deneuve, all of them reading this letter. I mean, so what you had, you were, as you came into the exhibition, you were given a Xerox copy of this letter, this email that was sent to Sophie Kuhl by a lover who was breaking off from her, and the last line of the email says, "Take care of yourself." And so what Sophie Kuhl is interested in doing is using this notion of, and in a sense, as we stand there looking at all these different actresses reading the letter, I think what we want to know, in the case of Sophie Kuhl, in the address book, wanting to have an idea of who the guy was who owned this, as we stand there looking at it, we want to have an idea of who wrote it, who wrote the letter. And we obviously come to the conclusion that it was Sophie Kuhl herself. And this Paul Auster wrote a book that has a character in it that's based on Sophie Kuhl. And again, there's sort of a sense that, that one of the characters goes in search of another character who turns out to be the Sophie Kuhl character. And here is the last example I'm going to show you of an artist, a contemporary artist, who's looking for a technical support. And this is James Coleman, and I'm showing you here two frames from a work that he made called Initials. And what he does is he makes two slides, two photographs, and they are projected onto a screen on top of one another, so they are incredible sharp focus. And one of them is made, Initials is made in a hospital, a tubercular sanatorium, hospital for tuberculosis. And you see the beds, and what you see here is a nurse and a patient. And I'm showing you it next to a Roy Lichtenstein, a cartoon in which, Lichtenstein has the woman saying, "It's not an engagement ring, is it?" So there is this sort of intimate exchange, but they're not looking at one another. This sense really of a kind of intimacy in which you have your back to the person you're talking to, which is, of course, what you have to do in a comic book. You can't do what you do in a film by cutting between the speaker and the listener. You have to have just the two people in the single frame, not looking at each other. And, I decided to call this the double face out. And here's another example of it. It's quite consistent in Kentridge's work. And I want to go forward into an example of a work by Marcel Brotars. And Brotars we could think of as, an artist involved in installation, because here we have a work of his in Dusseldorf called The Eagle from the Oligocene to the Present, which we could think of as an installation piece, but I think Brotars is far, far, far from the idea of installation. And here is a work which he calls the analysis of a painting, and the painting is called A Voyage on the North Sea. It was a painting he picked up sort of in a knick-knack shop in Paris. And you see the painting here, and here you see longboats, or, fishing boats from the schooner, and then at another point you see, what Brotars does is he focuses on one part and another part of the picture, and then makes a film with a sort of movement from one image to the next. The longboats, and then to the sort of parts of the sail. Here, the sail. And when we see that, when we see the longboat, in a sense we could say this whole thing is not just the analysis of a painting, but it is the kind of presentation of the history of art, or the history of modernism, because the longboats on the waves are, in a sense, from Courbet. And this little kind of ripple of the sail we could think of here, we could think of in relationship to someone like Manzoni or the monochrome. And when he ends up with just this one complete monochrome of the canvas. And that reminds me of this amazing line, from Mallarmé's poem called Salut, which is toast, where he says, Au blanc souci de notre toile, to the white care of our canvas. He's making a toast to, we could say, the artist's or the poet's own medium, the artist's blank canvas or the poet's white page. So this succession really of artists who have found the support for their medium in the tradition of themselves as artists, and reorganizing some sort of medium for themselves. I've shown you various cases, and I hope this becomes clear. And that's my story.
Wow, thank you. Passo un momento all'italiano. Grazie molto per questa lunga carrellata per parlare del medium. Un secondo, il medium della conferenza stessa è interessante, e come la critica d'arte può reinventare il medium che usa ai suoi fini, con la carrellata delle immagini e le associazioni che portano dall'una all'altra fino alla fine. Mi interessa molto. Vorrei porre una domanda a Rosalind a proposito di questo suo lavoro di scavo e questo suo lavoro sul medium della conferenza stessa. può dirci qualche cosa, dopodiché passerei a Luca Cerizza la parola per altre domande e per le vostre domande.
Let me think. The lecture as a medium.
How you use that, how you go into the tradition of the lecture and reinvent it for your own work.
Well, that's a very complicated question.
Yes, you don't have to answer. It's okay. Okay, that's it. Next question.
Well, one of the things I do, which is not reinventing it, but I am very, very determined to speak without a microphone and to make the very last person in the room, you back there, I want you to hear me. Can you hear me? It's reinventing the voice.
Okay, great.
In English or in Italiano?
English.
But yeah.
Well, I can.
Yeah. No, I had actually many questions, but of course, I'm going to ask a very simple one, which was my curiosity reading some of your latest book you discussed here, under Blue Cup, for example. And is, where do you draw the line between, how do you define installation, which is somehow one of your recent enemy, it seems so. And
Enemy?
well, yeah, you made it. Installation. How you define installation? How you draw the line between, for example, expanded field in sculpture and installation? Because one might think, that some of the examples you discuss in sculpture and expanded field, for example, could be considered installations themselves, or installation evolved out of also these examples.
Does what evolve?
Evolved out of some example probably that you mentioned in the sculpture and expanded field.
Well, sculpture in the expanded field, I forget when I wrote it. It was one of those attack ads, it was one of those things where what made me incredibly angry about the kind of criticism that was being written about the work of the 60s was that people were saying, anything goes. They were using the word pluralism. You had the possibility of doing this, doing that, walks in the woods, the spiral jetty, making those kinds of constructions. I mean, this sort of notion that everything and anything was possible. And the art historian Heinrich Wülflin said, not everything is possible at any one time. And I think an historian has to think that not everything is possible, that there are historical breaks. And this is something, of course, that Michel Foucault talked about when he talked about episteme, these historical breaks that are absolute. And so sculpture in the expanded field was such an attack. And the expanded field came from, a book by the very important literary critic, American literary critic, Frederick Jameson. He wrote a book called The Political Unconscious. And the last chapter of that book has to, kind of maps out an expanded field, which is sort of a, a structuralist kind of convention, where you take a binary structure and you open it, a binary opposition like white versus black, and you open it out because society, or you could say stop versus go, society cannot operate in terms of these absolute oppositions. There has to be a maybe. You know, in terms of the red light and the green light, there has to be a yellow light. And so what you do is you expand the absolute binary opposition to a quaternary or fourfold field. And in the operation on that quaternary field gives you a whole series of possibilities, but those possibilities are always linked to the starting out opposition. So if you start from, if the opposition has to do with something that gives you, which gives you the sort of synthesis of sculpture, the other syntheses made around this quaternary field, those other oppositions, create what I thought of as all of the possible sites for sculpture during the 60s and 70s at that moment. So that's what sculpture in the expanded field was. It was sort of an attack on the idea of pluralism where anything goes at any one time. Does that answer what you asked?
Yeah, let's say yes. Great.
Oh, you want to know about installation?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I left that out. I got involved in the other thing. Well, I do think that certain forms of installation, I'm thinking now like about Sol LeWitt, that those go into, into the sort of circuit of the expanded field, and they become, that is an aspect of installation. It's not about growing pigs in a hut. I mean, Sol LeWitt would never do that. His work is much too involved in precisely the white wall or the white cube. So I think that LeWitt's notion of installation is precisely about this expanded field. So it depends on the installation you're talking about.
Chi ha domande? Spero che, come dice Carmen, taccia ora. No, parli ora, taccia per sempre. Prego.
Thank you very much, Rosalind, for this very inspiring lecture. I have a question. Considering what you described about the ability of artists to reinvent, question their medium, go against the tradition and invent it anew, what about artists who are actually working within mediums that have almost no tradition? We are actually facing, and Caroline is very passionate about this topic, I know. We are facing, this new age in which artists are actually facing the digital and working within the digital. So I'm very curious to know how, as an art historian, you advise us to approach them.
That is an extremely difficult question to answer. I don't really know. Obviously, in the history of photography, the advent of digital photography washes away whole notions of the photographic as a medium, which I have always sort of related to the notion of the index, which means the sort of that reality hits the emulsion of the film as a kind of cause and leaves a trace on the emulsion. But digital photography completely washes away the idea of the index because, as we know, there are programs that can completely reinvent the photograph. So I'm really sorry. I'm too stupid to know about digital.
Non c'è un microfono, no. Poi... Prego.
Thank you. It's not really a question, it's more about a curiosity. You mentioned a book by Paul Auster regarding Paul Auster.
A book by whom?
Paul Auster.
Oh, Auster.
Yes, about related to the work of the artist. I wanted to know which book is.
The book that Sophie Kahn, well, they're great friends. Let's
okay.
Google it. Speaking about the digital, it takes 30 seconds.
Oh yeah, the Paul Auster book. I'm sorry, I forget the name.
Can somebody Google the Paul Auster Sophie Kahn book, please? It takes 30 seconds. Thank you.
Thanks.
What is it called?
Leviathan. Like
Oh,
Hobbes.
Leviathan.
Hobbes. Yes.
It's very interesting.
This question is interesting because the question of facts is such an easy thing to solve nowadays, and we get the false truths. Just to swing us back to your beginning about Trump's tweets, what's interesting also about them is that there are very few facts. While the digital age is so much about giving the possibility of finding out what novel it is in 30 seconds, his tweets seem to not be about facts. So it's as if
He's always saying so-called facts.
well, yes, he's accusing the others of not being truthful, but he's expanding an area of that interjection of Freud in the conversations with Dora. It's almost as if that space is expanded to a place where you cannot Google it.
Well, you know that, Trump has this sort of tremendous, this desire, this compulsion to attack facts. So that's why he calls things fake news or alternative facts. I mean, there is this sort of refusal to think that certain, in refusal of history, that certain things actually took place, and you can't say that they didn't. I think that, at one point he refused to go to the Holocaust Museum in Israel. I mean, the guy's psychosis is endless.
And I would like to ask, I don't know, maybe it sounds silly, but do you think that art can still function as a deictic tool to link a place and a time? A work of art, can it be at the same, can it work as a way to link place and time still nowadays with the digital issue we have discussed before?
Can art function now to link time and place?
I guess it's like Kentridge in Johannesburg,
Yeah.
Joyce.
Yeah, I mean, Kentridge's work is endlessly involved in linking time and place, but he himself, in a lecture, said that apartheid is the rock on which art is wrecked, that you cannot make good art. The artist who is only kind of making art about something like apartheid cannot make good art. So obviously, though, Kentridge himself is very, very involved in linking time and place. He is also aware that that is the sort of the potential pitfall for the artist. And I think that his desire to make good art is the desire to represent his own medium, like the windshield wipers representing the eraser. So there is a sort of ambivalence between his own desire to be faithful to his medium and address time and place or history. Well, I think what I was trying to talk about in terms of Ed Ruscha and Ed Ruscha's looking backward at the history of his own medium and doing that through the gasoline stations or the stains. Well, I don't know whether you call that time and place because it's within the given medium. So, but I think of that, what I'm trying to sort of explain is that these artists are very great and very serious, and we have to take them seriously. Or I have to take them seriously. You can do what you want.
Ok.
Allora,
vi ringrazio tutti per essere venuti e ringrazio soprattutto Rosalind per questa sua generosità, essere con noi qui e buona serata.